This time last year was the Washington Commanders that were down bad. Now it's the Dallas Cowboys' turn to come into this game as the severe underdogs. How bad are the Dallas Cowboys? Will it matter in the divisional matchup? That and more coming up on this crossover episode of Locked On Cowboys and Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Cowboys fans? What's up, Commanders fans? Welcome into this crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Cowboys. Both shows part of the illustrious Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm David Harrison. He is Marcus Mosier. We are the hosts of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Cowboys podcast, respectively. Your daily podcast covering each of these NFL teams. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode, in which we are going to talk about who's going to run, quotation marks around the word run for a reason, week 12 between the Washington Commanders and Dallas Cowboys. We're talking about the Washington Commanders trying to get back to a sense of normalcy here in week 12. And we are going to ask Marcus Mosier the question, how bad are the Dallas Cowboys? Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app, use the code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 ticket. We thank you, of course, for coming through today. Every dayers for both of these programs, we send a special thank you to you for coming through every day. If you're a first timer, welcome to our special weekly episode that we do. This is one of our best episodes. Always a fun time to talk with a fellow host on the Locked On Podcast Network. And if you hate me as a Cowboys fan, it's okay. I'm only going to be here once this week, and then again at the end of the year. Marcus, what is up? Hopefully you're doing better than the team you cover, but of course we got to dive into all of the stuff happening with the Dallas Cowboys right now.
Yeah, this is a rough season. Maybe the Cowboy fans took for granted these 12-5 seasons where, yeah, you might win a playoff game and get knocked off in round 2, but at least your team was competitive and in the thick of things going into the new year. Not the case this year.
You know, it's funny because I was having a conversation this time last year, actually, and there was a Cowboys representative in this conversation. I'll put it that way, and they were like, "Man, like I'm so upset that this team never wins the Super Bowl, can't get over the hump. All they do is go to the playoffs. Yeah, they win the division like every other year, but all they do is go to the playoffs and disappoint every year." I'm like, bro, like, do you understand how many burgundy wearing fans would love to complain about what you're complaining about right now? It always is weirder when you're on the other side of this, but Cowboys fans certainly going through it this year. And I know Commanders fans are enjoying it a little bit. I think that's just kind of how fandom works. But what's the root of it, Marcus? Like, what do you think is there's obviously not one thing, right? But
I disagree. There is one thing.
Oh, there is one thing. Fantastic.
The one thing happens to own the team, right? Like it starts at Jerry Jones. Now, I want to be clear. This isn't all Jerry Jones's fault. Because I do think for the most part, he is a generally good owner. Like, people talk about the Cowboys. They are the most popular team in all of professional sports. But I think the way that they handled this season in particular was bad. Honestly, I think the messaging was the problem, David, because he said the corny thing about them going all in, which if you looked at any of their moves all offseason, you know that wasn't the case. I think if Jerry Jones just would have went out and told everybody in March, the plan is, hey, this is a rebuilding or retooling year. We know we're not going to be as talented right away as we were last year. We're hopeful that our young guys can step up by the end of the year, but we understand that the last couple of years was our window, and this is our time to reset. Instead, there was the messaging of, hey, we're all in on this version of the team. And when they got off to a slow start, things just started to avalanche on them. And now that they're without Dak Prescott, they've been without Micah Parsons for a good chunk of the season. They are decimated on defense. You're seeing why they needed this year. They just don't have the talent and depth that they've had in the last couple of years because a lot of those guys are playing in Washington right now.
They are, and they're all looking forward to actually playing the Dallas Cowboys again. Some of them more so than others. Dorrance Armstrong Jr. certainly got a smile on his face when he started talking about playing the Dallas Cowboys and potentially sacking his good buddy Cooper Rush this weekend. And I want to kind of go there, Marcus. Like, the Dallas Cowboys offensive struggles, looking through the numbers, like, this offense, and I don't want to be disrespectful to Dak, like, clearly it's better if Dak is that quarterback than Cooper Rush or when he's healthy. But this offense, it wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire even when Dak was healthy before the injury. What was going on with that offense? And do you think, did the Dallas Cowboys Did they go all in at the wrong spot by paying Dak Prescott this enormous contract that now everybody's wondering if they're going to try to get out of this offseason?
No, first of all, they really can't. There's no way they can get out of that deal this offseason. No, I don't think they made a mistake. I think they understood that they wanted to get Dak committed to a long-term deal and try to build around him for not just this year, but for the next 5 years. You started the season off with 2 rookie offensive linemen, Tyler Guyton and Cooper Beebe. Your right tackle, Terrence Steele, has struggled. Zach Martin has been not quite as good this year. And then they just have had injuries. Jake Ferguson missed some time in the earlier part of the year. Brandon Cooks has missed most of the season. They can't really run the ball, and that's not all that surprising given that they are shuffling in new starters on the offensive line. And things have been so bad on the defensive side of the ball that Dak is pressed. And this is if you want to criticize Dak, this is where you criticize him. He's played some superhero ball, or he thinks he needs to play that on every snap, and that's led to inefficient play and turnovers. And now that he's not playing, you're seeing the defense continue to get shredded and the offense not be able to make up for it at all. So it's really a both sides problem. Will that get better anytime soon? No, because David, I think there's a good chance the Cowboys are without both Pro Bowl guards this week, Tyler Smith and Zach Martin. You're already starting 2 rookies. You're going to be starting 2 undrafted guys likely in those spots. I think we'll see more of the same from the offense.
Yeah, and even Tyler Guyton. I mean, I saw that he was a full participant on Wednesday, but he's got that shoulder injury that he aggravated on Monday night, and he's going to try to give it a go as well. And that's going to that part of the conversation is going to come up again, as you can predict in this episode. But let's flip over to the defense, right? Because the defense is something that was really interesting. Like when Dan Quinn got hired away from the Dallas Cowboys, there was kind of a mixed bag. There was kind of a group that was like, hey, Cowboys fan here, you're getting a really good coach, da-da-da-da. And then there was kind of like, hey, Cowboys fan here, thanks for taking this guy. He can't stop a run anyway, so good luck with that. And Washington Commanders defense has actually struggled pretty mightily against the run. Again, we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But how is that defense fared? Again, injuries, right? I know Deron Bland is looking to come back this week. Micah Parsons missed time, DeMarcus Lawrence. So how has that defense been looking, and how much of what is happening on that side of the ball has to do with all these injuries?
Yeah, so let's start with Deron Bland, who obviously had the pick 6 against Washington last year. He has not played a single down this year. So when you lose an all-pro corner, and that's what Deron Bland was last year, an all-pro corner, it's really hard to make up for that. And not only have they lost Bland, but you have Trayvon Diggs coming off a torn ACL. Jordan Lewis missed last week with a neck injury. And his top 3 backups have all missed time with injuries. So you've been decimated in the secondary. It's really hard to evaluate Mike Zimmer because he hasn't been given a fair shake at this. We know that the NFL is about your players, right? I mean, coaching matters, obviously, but it's the guys up front that can actually play. I had some big concerns, David, going into the year, like Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler. They're not Pro Bowl players at this stage of their career, but they're really solid contributors. More so Dorrance Armstrong than Fowler, because Armstrong can stop the run. So when the Cowboys lost Sam Williams in training camp to a torn ACL, on top of Fowler and Armstrong leaving in free agency, and then in week 4, you lose Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, and Marshawn Nealon. I mean, you're talking about like losing 6 defensive linemen from the last year and a half, and they're just gone, not contributing. It's really hard to stop teams when you have a bad defensive line and a really bad secondary, all lost because of injury.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you mentioned Dante Fowler, and yeah, I mean, he's loving life with Washington. I mean, he's on pace to set career numbers, and was just recently named an NFL.com sleeper to make the Pro Bowl, his first Pro Bowl, as it were. So certainly some things are kind of going well on that side of the conversation, and that might actually make it a little bit worse when you're looking at the Cowboys side of the situation. But we're going to flip this conversation over to that Washington Commanders side coming up next on today's Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Commanders, Locked On Cowboys, both part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you in part by BetterHelp. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. And right now, I want to take a moment to say thank you to some people in my life that are pretty important. And those people today are going to be the Locked On Podcast Network. And no, I'm not just sucking up to get a better Christmas bonus this year, because we don't get Christmas bonuses. But I truly, truly, truly am grateful to be a part of this network, be with people like Marcus Mosier who make this job a whole lot of fun. And I'm hoping that you have some people out there that make your life a lot of fun. But along with the person and the people that I just shouted out, there's another person that we all don't necessarily give enough credit to, and that is ourselves, because it's sometimes hard in this world to remind ourselves that we are making the best and making the most sense of everything going on around us in this crazy world. It's not easy all the time. So here's a reminder for you to send some thanks to the people around you, including yourself. And if you need help finding it, if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient. So let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Today's episode is also brought to you in part by Game Time, and Game Time has this really cool feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier than ever before, because Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so that you don't have to waste your valuable time searching through thousands of tickets. The curated deals make it easier to find the best and the greatest seats to your live sports, comedy, theater, any live event in your area. For example, my Game Time Picks right now features tickets to see the Dallas Cowboys face the Washington Commanders this weekend for $131, or you can see the Colorado Avalanche visiting the Washington Capitals for $31. And on the app, I toggle in the all-in pricing, and I get all of my prices up front, no surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork, out of buying concert tickets, game tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. For the Washington Commanders, part of the biggest advantage they might have coming into this game against the Dallas Cowboys is not just what's happening in Dallas, obviously, but also coming off the pseudo bye. The Washington Commanders playing Thursday Night Football in Week 11 against the Philadelphia Eagles. Unfortunately for the Commanders, a loss there, but now they've had all of that time off to kind of reset, recoup, recover, get back to business as usual, which is a big deal for them, but also get healthy. Jayden Daniels is fully off of the injury report, was off the injury report for Thursday night as well, but Dan Quinn coming out on Monday and basically saying definitively, look, Jayden Daniels no longer injured. Brian Robinson Jr., the running back, no longer on the injury report. The offensive line practicing in full for the first time in a very long time for some of those guys. Rookie Brandon Coleman, offensive tackle, was limited with a thumb injury, but Cornelius Lucas, the veteran backup behind Brandon Coleman, not on the injury report at all after suffering an ankle injury a few weeks ago. So the Washington Commanders getting healthier. The Dallas Cowboys coming off of a short week, suffering some injuries while they are still getting a little bit healthier. Deron Bland, we just talked about, potentially Marshawn Neal, I know Brandon Cooks maybe as well might be an option as well. So both teams getting a little bit healthier, but I think, Marcus, that extended break between the Eagles game, the Cowboys game, and the fact that they're getting healthy is going to really help them try to get back to normal against this Dallas Cowboys team.
Yeah, and we should mention the Cowboys played a Monday night game, and now they're having to go play on the road. You know, they're playing on 6 days while Washington's playing on 10. That's a pretty big advantage. But my question for you, David, is I've watched this team pretty extensively over the last month. It hasn't looked quite the same as it did maybe back in September and October. Do you think this Washington team is for real? Are they closer to this team that we saw earlier in the year, or the team that we saw against Pittsburgh and Philadelphia?
So I think they're definitely closer to the team that you saw earlier in the season. And I'll actually address that with both of those games in mind, right? So the Pittsburgh Steelers game, I think you saw, generally speaking, more of what the Washington Commanders are. When you tack on, if you were to, I should say, tack on their, of course, adjusted completion numbers and all this stuff that account for drops and other weird things, throwaways. I don't know what that is off the top of my head, but Jayden Daniels' overall completion percentage against Pittsburgh Steelers, 50%. However, depending on who you ask, somewhere between 6 to 9 dropped passes in that game. If you add those 6 to 9 dropped passes by Commanders receivers onto that completion percentage, it's a little bit better, right? So Jayden Daniels certainly looked okay there. The defense was pretty good outside of the one really bad blown coverage by Benjamin St-Juste, which he was pretty beat up about after the game as well. And you put up almost 30 points against one of the best scoring defenses in the National Football League. I feel like that's actually, if you turn those drops into catches, it's actually a pretty good representation of what the Washington Commanders are. And that's not a bad outcome for a game, even if you do end up losing that game, because the Steelers certainly made their own mistakes as well that they could have cleaned up. Now, against the Eagles, I think there's a couple things in play there. One, I don't think Jayden Daniels was 100% healthy. I think he was probably about 80% healthy, but then in that game, he injures his hand. It's also a cold weather game.
Yeah.
Not cold to some people, not cold to me, right? To me, it's got to get to about 20 degrees before I start going like, man, this is cold. But Jayden Daniels, Southern California kid, went to college at Arizona State, went to college at Louisiana State. That was pretty cold for him. Something I noticed, Marcus, on tape, which is could be anecdotal, could be something, I don't know. Every time he handed the ball off, hands went right in the warmer. Every time he got rid of the ball on a pass, hands went right in the warmer. Not a couple of times, every time. That to me shows you that this quarterback had cold on his mind the entire night. On top of the health, offensive line had been banged up, continue to be banged up. I think it was just kind of a culmination of being week 11, doing all that stuff. Defensively, they had some issues, and I think it all just kind of came to roost all together. Dan Quinn also talked about the fact that every practice between a Sunday game and a Thursday game is essentially a glorified walkthrough. Yep. No full speed reps. You got a rookie quarterback, Jayden Daniels, and as much as we've praised his preparation, I think what we didn't necessarily anticipate going into Philadelphia was the fact that that preparation is as extensive because he needs it, because he relies on it. Not having that extensive amount of preparation for an opponent, especially the first time he's ever had to do that in the NFL, I think all of those things combined led to what you saw Thursday night against Philadelphia Eagles.
So, first of all, to address the cold stuff, like, get out of here, Jayden Daniels. I'm eerie right now. It's snowing as we're recording this podcast, and I'm just debating, hey, is this shorts weather still? Like shorts and hoodie weather? Do I actually have on pants? Get out of here with that nonsense. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, this is going to be seen as a revenge game for Dan Quinn, for Joe Witt, for Dante Fowler. The names go on and on.
Yeah.
Explain that to me a little bit, because I'm having a hard time understanding why this is a revenge game when, like, Dorrance Armstrong got 2 contracts from Dallas. Like, they treated him well. The Cowboys continued to pay Dante Fowler. They gave Dan Quinn a second chance. Like, why is this just them, being competitive, or is there something else going on here?
Yeah, I would say inside the building, there's no revenge, right? Like, it's not a revenge game. Now, Dan Quinn has admitted, like, as a younger coach, like, he probably would have been more juiced to go up against his former team. I think that's really all it is. It's a team that you used to coach for, a team you used to play for. You still have friends over there. And, what friend doesn't want to beat another friend in competition and anything competitive? Okay. I think that's
just
really
to be clear. I didn't want it to be like, okay, there's a lot of animosity here. But
yeah.
I don't see that.
Even Dorrance Armstrong, who smiled at the thought of sacking Cooper Rush. Like, before that comment, he was like, Cooper Rush is my boy. Like, that's my guy. Like, I love Cooper. I can't wait to see him. He's like, yeah, of course I look forward to sacking him as well and telling him how much I enjoy sacking him on the field on Sunday. So yeah. So, I mean, especially with the injuries you guys are dealing with on the Cowboys offensive line over there. So, it's not, there's no animosity there that I'm aware of. And if there is, they're doing a very good job of hiding. Because like you said, I mean, the only person that I could even maybe see having a little bit of animosity will be Joe Witt Jr. Joe Witt Jr. is a guy who has felt like he should have been a defensive coordinator in the NFL since 2015, right? But that's not just the Dallas Cowboys not hiring him as a straight up defensive coordinator. That's every other NFL team in the league until Dan Quinn got the head coach job here, and then he hired him to be the full-time defensive coordinator. So that's wouldn't be Dallas Cowboys specific. That would be Joe Witt Jr. with a chip on his shoulder, wanting to show everybody, like, I knew I was ready for this, and look how ready I am for this task. So that would be the only thing. But again, that wouldn't be star specific, right?
And I want to ask you about Marshawn Lattimore, the corner that the Commanders traded for ahead of the deadline. Do you think we're going to see him this week? I know he hasn't played the last 2 games. Still waiting on the hamstring?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see him. I've told Locked On Commanders listeners, I'm resigned to the fact that we're not going to see Marshawn Lattimore on the field until after the bye, which would be in New Orleans, which would just be all kinds of poetic justice, right? Like, just first game. And honestly, for myself, I've picked that time not because I have any like hard medical information that tells me that, but because I don't want to drive myself crazy every single day wondering if Marshawn Lattimore is going to play. But for this week specifically, Dan Quinn did tell us they hope to get Marshawn going on the practice field as much as possible this week. Now, DNP on Wednesday does not, bode well for that potential. No. And the fact that Dan Quinn said we hope to get him going a little bit on the practice field. You have a guy with a hamstring injury, an all-pro cornerback that you traded for, and this trade was not about beating the Steelers, the Eagles, or even the Cowboys. This trade was about getting down the home stretch, maybe securing a division title, or getting into the postseason and bringing out your all-pro cornerback. So this is about winning in late December, early January, not about winning in November. The Washington Commanders are not going to rush him onto the field. And because of that, I don't think you're going to see him against Dallas. I don't think you're going to see him against Tennessee. Truthfully, you don't need him against Tennessee. And then you got the bye week after that. So I expect to see Marshawn Lattimore on the field for the first time in New Orleans, which, hey, good to go.
Yeah, it'd be fun. It's noteworthy for the Cowboys because if the Cowboys have any chance to win in this game, it's going to have to be on CeeDee Lamb, who has been limited with a back and foot injury. And we've seen before, like even early in this game against Houston, against Derek Stingley and their corners, he was able to take over for a little bit. He can have those games even without Dak Prescott where he's just unbelievable. And without Marshawn Lattimore going up against their young corners, whether it's St. Juste, I'm sure it won't be Emmanuel Forbes, the rookie from Michigan, Sanistrell. We'll see. But big news for Cowboys. If they at least want to stay competitive, not having Lattimore on the field.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's going to come up here in our next segment. We're going to talk about the 3 things that each team must do on either side of this contest to get a win. That's coming up next on today's Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Commanders and Locked On Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you in part by FanDuel. Get ready to take on the NFL action this weekend with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers to FanDuel, you can get $5. You can get $150 in bonus bets when you bet your first $5, and that bet wins. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place your bets on the NFL pregame and even during the game all in one place. So if you get a hunch during the game, and you want to check out the latest stats to confirm that hunch, view the play-by-play to see how the game flow is going and so much more, you can do it all in the exact same place that you can place that bet. Or you can make your bets before the game, just like one on the Washington Commanders, who are now 10.5-point favorites over the Dallas Cowboys. That line started at 9.5. So go to FanDuel.com to join today. Make whatever bets you want to, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football. This week's Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Cowboys, Locked On Commanders is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the app, use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 ticket. Marcus Mosher of Locked On Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys visiting the Washington Commanders. First time these two divisional rivals will play. It is one of the great rivalries in sports history, certainly in NFL history. I think it was ranked by Bucky Brooks of NFL.com as the 3rd best NFL rivalry today. Unfortunately, in most recent times, one of these two teams has been down pretty bad, and that certainly takes a little bit of the shine off of the rivalry. I think, as much as Commanders fans don't appreciate losing to the Philadelphia Eagles, I think you appreciate the fact that both teams came in with a whole lot of excitement and confidence in that game. You'd love to see the Cowboys and Commanders both doing that. Maybe next year. Marcus, if the Cowboys are going to pull off this upset, it's now to 10.5 points. Like we just said, the spread is massive. What do you think, or what do the Cowboys have to do in order to get that win?
So on offense, they have to be able to run the ball. Last week, Cooper Rush dropped back to throw the ball, I believe 56 times against Houston. And I know the final score was 34-10, but that was a really close game going into the last couple of minutes of the third quarter. The Cowboys had a chance to cut it to 3 going into the fourth quarter. They need to be able to run the ball in this game. And I don't want to see it out of shotgun. They did not have a single run last week from under center. You're going to have to do it in this game because you can't expose your backup quarterback that much. On defense, I actually have more faith in their defense than their offense at this point. You should be getting back Jordan Lewis. We'll see about DeRon Bland. It sounds like he could be getting back. Marshawn Nealon has a chance to play this week. You're starting to get some of the pieces back on that side of the ball. You have to figure out a way to contain Jayden Daniels, keep him in the pocket, make him beat you from the pocket. He will do that, but that's much better than him taking off with his legs because the Cowboys can't stop the run. And then the big X factor here, special teams. This is where the Cowboys can win games. Cavante Turpin, probably the best returner in the league. Brandon Aubrey, probably the best kicker in the league. Once you get past the 50-yard line, you are in field goal range. Make plays on special teams. Give the Cowboys or give your offense short fields and just try to keep this game close into the fourth quarter. That's how they can potentially steal a game from the Washington Commanders in Week 12.
Yeah, man. I'm with you on that special teams thing, especially. A couple of weeks ago against Pittsburgh Steelers, talk about mistakes. Olamide Zaccheaus muffing 2 punts, was able to fall on one. Unfortunately, the Steelers were able to fall on the other one, and I'm not going to say who, but I watched a punt returner for the Commanders muff a punt in practice today. So certainly don't want to see that kind of stuff continue. And then, yeah, I mean, Turpin, if you're a special teams coordinator and you're not terrified of this dude, anytime you have to face him, then you're not going to do your job very well. So certainly some big things there. My question for you, Marcus, is actually Nealon. So Nealon is someone that I was really excited about coming into the draft process. Didn't know, how much the Commanders would prioritize that position, especially after all the free agent acquisitions they made in the offseason. But let me ask you, going, pre-injury, all that stuff, like how was he coming along? And then what do you like? How good can you expect him to possibly be coming back from that injury?
So I think it was frustrating because the game the Cowboys lost DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons was against the Giants in week 4. They played Pittsburgh in week 5, and this was Marshawn Nealon's first start. He was going to play almost every snap, and he got hurt on the second snap of the game. And it was such a bummer because he was starting to show that power where he could drive offensive linemen back off the ball. And that's what they've desperately needed on this defensive line. We'll see what he looks like coming back from a lower body injury, his first game, if he's able to play this week. But I think long-term, he is a guy that does make sense opposite of Micah Parsons in this defense.
Yeah, could be a pairing that look, the Washington Commanders offensive line I think has been better than a lot of people expected, but there's still going to be an off-season conversation about upgrading at least a couple of those positions on the offensive line, and looking at what the Cowboys have brewing behind this rough season in their pass rush. They're going to need it for the Washington Commanders to win this game. I'm going to throw out kind of the obvious one here in the second one, but the first one's got to be move Terry McLaurin. And Marcus, I've actually got a question for you coming up here about that one. It'll be interesting to see what you say on it. Number 2, sack the crap out of Cooper Rush. You just have to do it, right? Especially if these offensive linemen can't get healthy. This is a game where you got to keep an eye on that Dallas Cowboys injury report, because who does and doesn't play is going to be really important. And don't give up any free chicken, right? We talk about those explosive passes of CeeDee Lamb. Rico Dowdle is a guy that, that pass play out of shotgun from the 21-yard line going in is the exact same pass play they used against the Arizona Cardinals. Saw it one time on tape. Told my listeners, if the Cowboys get to the 21-yard line, watch out for this play. It's the exact same play they pulled off, and I can't believe they pulled it off. Don't give up any free chicken, anything that you can easily scout against. And then third, time of possession, man. Ground the game. Brian Robinson is off the injury report. Austin Eckler can certainly be effective. Jeremy McNichols has had his moments. Hell, keep all 4 running backs active, and Chris Rodriguez Jr. can do some pounding up between the guards and tackles. He'll probably be inactive. But the bottom line is Washington Commanders are 1-4 in games where they lost the time of possession battle. They're undefeated in games where they won the time of possession battle. And some of that goes hand in hand. You win the game, you run the clock, you ground it, got it. But there's also some things in there that are just indicative of how this team wins best, and it's by controlling that ground game. So that's why we talk about running the game. Marcus, I'll let you ask me any clarifying questions, but I want to ask you this one first. Of the NFL receivers, we got to qualify everything, right? Of NFL receivers who have more targets this season than Terry McLaurin, there are 10 of them. DJ Moore has the second highest percentage of single alignment. Split wide left 59% of the time for the Chicago Bears. That is the second highest single position alignment of any receiver in the NFL that has more targets than Terry McLaurin does this season. Terry McLaurin is number 1. What do you think Terry McLaurin's percentages compared to DJ Moore's?
Oh, man. Is it not close? Tell me.
It's not close.
Just had to get it in there, right? Terry McLaurin's a really good player. I know I maybe didn't love him early on in his career, but listen, I was wrong with Terry McLaurin. He's awesome. He's way better than I ever thought he could be as a prospect. Way better.
76%, Marcus.
Ridiculous.
Of Terry McLaurin's routes have come from split wide left alignment.
It's ridiculous.
And look, this is the conversation we had preseason about Cliff Kingsbury, because every Cardinals fan was like, he locked DeAndre Hopkins in split wide left jail. He's going to lock Terry McLaurin in the same prison. It is obviously something that has happened all season long. But just like a lot of things, it's not a problem until it's a problem. It became a problem against Philadelphia Eagles. And that's what kind of spurred the research and the questions. Ask Dan Quinn, not directly because you don't do that, but I essentially asked Dan Quinn about that, and he essentially said it's probably going to change. But that is a ridiculous number. So I just had to share that with everybody.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because Trayvon Diggs has played much better. He's usually lined up on that side. against Nico Collins last week. I believe there was 20 routes where they were matched up against each other. Diggs allowed 1 catch for 11 yards in that entire game. And this has been, at least historically, a matchup that Trayvon Diggs has done well. Now, again, he's coming off a torn ACL. I'm not sure he's the same type of player, but that is a battle where if the Cowboys can win that one, and you're not going to take Terry McLaurin completely out of the game, but limit him, maybe you have a chance to survive on that side of the ball.
Yeah. The Eagles didn't take Terry completely out of the game either. 1 catch for 10 yards, Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, I mean, that's not
he was certainly in the game. But yeah, if there's anybody who knows what Trayvon Diggs can do against Terry McLaurin, it's Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. So hopefully somebody over there is talking to Cliff Kingsbury and say, hey, dude, we got to get off that number. We got to get off that percentage. Let's at least lower it a couple 20% or so in this next game. But we're going to talk more about that over at Locked On Commanders on Friday. Marcus Mosher and Landon McCool of Locked On Cowboys will have more for you over on Locked On Cowboys. So make sure you're going over there. And for your next listen today, check out Locked On NFL. In the morning, the madman Tyler Rowland is going to give you a double shot of NFL espresso. In the afternoon, roll through the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. It's the all-new Locked On NFL, and it is twice a day. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders and Locked On Cowboys your first listens of the day, every day, every day. Thanks, of course, for coming through for both programs every single day. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind to one another, and we'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Cowboys, Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.